Hey everybody, welcome back to Video MSO Technical Series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it is now 2024, and I'm here to tell you why you should be playing MiSTer FPGA in the year of 2024, whether you own one or not. And if you already have one, maybe it's time for a second for another room. But I know a lot of the people that watch these episodes are just getting into the idea of FPGA gaming and are a little bit confused by MiSTer or wondering what it does, how it works, and how much it costs, because there's a lot of rumors out there about the overall expense of building a MiSTer. We can definitely dispel today, because you don't need to be a Rockefeller to get into FPGA gaming, and considering how much money it actually saves you in the long run, this is the economical way to enjoy your retro games in 2024, because MiSTer FPGA project has been an absolutely outstanding thing to see. I've been doing videos on this for over 3 years now. I have not gotten bored the entire time, and every single month MiSTer gives me something new, not only to make a video about, but to also enjoy in my own time. It's a very simple thing to do. You need a DE10 Nano, which you can buy directly from Terasic or on DigiKey or Mouser. I'll leave links below if I remember. I'm always very bad at that. But this is not that expensive. Yes, it's in the $200 range, but the amount of money you spend on it versus what it does for you, you're talking about like $1 per core at this point in time. And I do have build guides up on my channel as well that'll show you how to make both a single RAM MiSTer as well as a dual RAM MiSTer, which might become important in 2024, but right now we're not quite sure. But it is so easy to build a MiSTer, and it's so impressive what you get out of these things. This Altera Cyclone V system on a chip, the FPGA with the ARM processor on board, is doing everything you need to enjoy your retro games. Now this is an essential. You have to obviously have the DE10 Nano board. This is, for lack of a better term, the brain of the entire MiSTer project. But there's a lot of different ways to build a MiSTer, and you can definitely do it on a budget if you need to. I get all my parts from MiSTer Add-ons, and I will leave the link to the description below to his site and what builds I do. But you'll see here the traditional triple stack MiSTer is the most common thing you're going to see. You have the DE10 Nano in the middle, USB hub at the bottom, IO board on top, and RAM single or double stick on the left and right depending on how you're doing the configuration. This right now is going to run you around $500, but the amount of money it saves you is insane. But you can do things a lot simpler, and I know some people on a budget are worried about the cost, and I want everyone to play MiSTer FPGA in 2024, so be aware that you can get a basic USB hub. This one right now on Amazon is $8 that will function for your MiSTer, allowing you to plug in all of those different controllers. This is where a lot of the confusion comes in with MiSTer. Sometimes people think that you need to put every single board on. Sure, you're going to need RAM, but a single 128 megabyte stick from MiSTer Add-ons is going to be a $65 investment, and that's going to allow you to play absolutely every game that MiSTer currently offers. Don't save that $10 to $15 and go to the 64 megabyte RAM module, because it's going to be a little bit more restrictive. Something like Neo Geo here, one of my favorite consoles of all time, one of my favorite cores on MiSTer, the ROMs in some instances are going to be bigger than the 64 megabyte RAM stick is going to allow, which means you're not going to get the entire playable library. Stuff like Nintendo 64, the biggest cartridge is also 64 megabytes, so you want to have a little bit of overhead. It is a $15 difference. Just don't buy a coffee here and there and you've covered the overall expense. But as of my making of this video, right around $303 mark, you can build a functional MiSTer that's going to play all of the games available. You're definitely going to be using that USB hub, not the actual MiSTer Add-ons board itself, and I do recommend that one. But honestly, getting an RGB modded Neo Geo right now on eBay, there is one for sale for $1,000. That is just one system, and I do own an RGB modded AES next to me that I got a long time. And that's the great part about MiSTer as well. You get all of these cores, arcade, computer, and otherwise, on RGB as well if you want it. You can do S-Video, you can do composite, you can do component, you can do RF, you can do RGB, all through that VGA port on the top if you get the analog I/O board. MiSTer Add-ons has that S-Video adapter as well. From the audio to the analog video, this is going to reduce down the amount of modified systems you need to have if you want to have the best visual quality out. You can take the VGA port, or you can use the HDMI signal clean into your television without having to add any sort of HDMI equipment into your consoles to get good quality either. Something like the Nintendo 64 HDMI mod with a Nintendo 64 is going to cost you near to the cost of what a MiSTer would. But stuff like NES as well, trying to RGB mod these things is a absolute project as far far as soldering and pulling chips is concerned. Super Nintendo, you're going to have a lot of black jail bars on RGB unless you modify the console to remove some of them. RGB is not always a perfect quality out depending on the hardware revision you get, but when you use MiSTer FPGA, the RGB quality is always going to be spectacular, and it's going to save you a ton of time and a ton of money. But again, in 2024, if you've not yet started to test the Nintendo 64 core, or you don't have a MiSTer, this is some of the most fun you can have, and I can't wait to see this core progress. An HDMI modded Nintendo 64 on eBay right now, the cheapest one I saw was $500, and all that's going to do is play original cartridges over HDMI, where your $500 investment in MiSTer FPGA is going to give you Nintendo 64 near to 100 and change arcade cores, dozens of computer cores, dozens of consoles, and dozens of handhelds. Being able to play something like Sin and Punishment and clean HDMI out or clean RGB out without any modification to a Nintendo 64 is worth the cost of a MiSTer alone. Even if you're not a Nintendo 64 fan, there's definitely a console out there that you probably want to experience again, and if you think about the cost of getting it, the cabling, the modifications to get clear signal out, or a scaler to go along with the hardware, you're well over the cost of MiSTer FPGA just to play that one system. Or something like Sega Saturn, the games are getting insanely expensive, and getting an optical disc emulator while an option is going to be pricey. Now Sega Saturn definitely has the best quality out of any system I've seen as far as RGB is concerned, but it's still going to cost you a ton. And there's so many other systems you can play on MiSTer FPGA. There's core upon core upon core. You probably will only touch about 20% of them depending on your taste, but that still comes down to being like $25 per core if you actually break down the math. Because again, I own a Sega CDX, something like that with RGB cabling and a scaler is going to be over the price of MiSTer FPGA right off the start. Now, I'm not saying I don't love my original hardware, and I'm not saying I'm selling any of this stuff anytime soon, but when it comes time for me to play a game, I just pop my MiSTer FPGA on, because I'm sure if you're watching this channel, you're probably a busy adult as well. Well, maybe adult's a loose term, we're all still playing video games. It is an adult hobby, don't let anyone else tell you any differently. But in the evening when I'm not working on videos or doing my primary filmmaking job, I have maybe about an hour to actually play a video game. So being able to turn on MiSTer and have all of these systems, computers, arcade cores, handhelds, and consoles at my fingertips lets me get into the game quicker and lets me start enjoying more things without having to deal with the scaler settings, the cables, and everything else just to hook up one console. Sega Saturn's still in development, and that's been one of the most fun things to play around in 2023. But of course, stuff like PlayStation 1 cores exist, and they are better than the original hardware, both in their functionality as well as the fact that there's a 2x core that gives you improvements over the actual base PlayStation 1 clock speeds. That's the thing, you can get RGB out of a PlayStation 1, but on original hardware you're not going to really get the enhancements that Robert FPGA Zoomspots bought to PlayStation 1 when he was developing that core. It's just an easier way to play games, it's a more fun way to play games, and with the enhancements it can be better than original hardware, and that is something that is incredible. And of course, for those fringe cases out there, stuff like light guns on LCD TVs, you're going to be able to use all of your different light guns. You can use that GunCon 1 on a CRT television, but the GunCon 3 here with those LED sensors, you can use them on MiSTer as well. Or something like Capcom CPS 2, a multi-board here with all the games is going to run you over $1,000, and I actually did sell this hardware for $1,200 locally because I found that I never took it out of the closet and hooked it up to my Supergun anymore now that I had MiSTer FPGA. When I want to sit down and just start enjoying Capcom CPS 2, I can just grab that board, but there's so many other arcade cores, cave shmups, PCBs that run into the multiple thousands of dollars, and they're all going to be playable here on MiSTer FPGA today, and we're going to be getting so many new things in 2024 as the year goes on. The reality is original hardware is very expensive, and MiSTer is going to save you a crap ton of money. One investment in a MiSTer is going to give you probably close to my estimate about $25,000 in original console hardware alone if you modified it all for the best video signal out. If you add stuff like Neo Geo CD, Neo Geo AES, all of the different arcade boards, I swear you're close to $100,000 in real hardware if you bought every single thing on the list. Now, I'm not pretending that $500 isn't cheap. I get it, we all have different budgets and you don't just run around and spend $500 on any given day. But if you are investing in retro gaming, and if you've seen the price of original games and original hardware anytime recently, you're going to realize that the retro gaming space is absolutely insane on the pricing. I do not buy many games anymore. Maybe I'll trade something for something else, but for the most most part, I don't really expand my library with a lot of retro stuff. One, because I bought a lot of it back in the day when it was cheap, and two, I actually do have a retro gaming budget both on the hardware and software side, and I never exceed that. I only spend where I can and when I want. But if you've been on the fence about a MiSTer FPGA, this should be your notice that you should get into it in 2024. There is so much fun to be had. The community is absolutely amazing. We chat with each other all the time, come up with new ideas, and just basically have fun. And that's the thing when you buy MiSTer FPGA. You're not just buying a device that plays hundreds upon hundreds of retro cores with perfect video out. You're also getting into an ecosystem where I've met some people that I talk to on a daily basis about what's going on. That's part of the investment that you're making. You get a great group of friends that you can chat with, and if you ever need any help with this stuff, you can leave me a comment down below. But if you don't own a MiSTer yet, buy one in 2024, and if you do own one, buy a second one. Trust me, they get addictive. See you next time. Bye-bye.